Hey, this is Shaun with the Atlanta Tennis Podcast, powered by Go Tennis. Check out our calendar of Metro Atlanta tennis events at letsgotennis.com. And if you're a fan of Bull Shark Sports, go to shop.letsgotennis.com. Get yourself a hoodie or a hat. This is Youth Sports Talk with Coach Ben Hestley. Today, we are asking the question, what is periodization? It's even just fun to say, periodization. What is periodization? And does everyone need it? Ben, you ready to talk youth sports?
Let's dive in.
All right. So, does everyone need it? My assumption, since this is kind of a complex thing, my assumption is no, unless we've got different versions. So, is this a high level conversation?
Yeah, pretty high level conversation. So periodization, it's one of those fancy academic words, right? Which basically just means have a plan, and a somewhat of a long term plan. So it's not something every parent or player or coach needs to do with their players. Today we're talking about a player that has maybe played a few rec seasons or taken several lessons, engaged in some competition with their sport, and have said, hey, you know what? I think I could be really good at this. I'd like to give it a shot and work on my development in this sport. And so now I'm going to take it pretty seriously and try to practice and train and get really good at this thing. So that's when you would need a periodization plan. And this periodization plan, you can Google it, search it, and come up with many different definitions and details and things. But basically, it's a detailed plan over a healthy given period of time. So, and that allows for your peak performance when you want that peak performance, while also minimizing overuse, injuries, and burnout.
Mm-hmm. All right. So if I want to go back a little bit and define it even deeper. So let's step back on the word even periodization. In my in my research, it looks like it is more of an academic term even that came out of from history professors that actually go backwards and try to create things. When we say, oh, we talk about the prehistoric period, or we periodize history and coming forward. So I think we could even take this a step further, which I think would be nuts. But you could actually go backwards in a player's development and say, here's what you've done, here's how long it takes, here's where we are, these are the successes and the failures, and then let's now also periodize forward. So let me read this, if you don't mind, Ben, where it says it's a periodization is an overall concept of training that deals with the division of the training process into specific phases. Programming is manipulating those variables into sets and repetitions and load that are needed to bring about the specific adaptations desired. It gets deep into that, but
Wow.
basically you're maximizing training adaptations to prevent the onset, this is what you said, of overtraining syndrome, aka burnout, right?
Yeah. So this does away with, like in my day, the 1,000 ball routine, right? Hey, if you want to have a really good serve, just go hit 1,000 balls. If you want to have a topspin forehand, let a coach feed you 1,000 balls. If you want to be good at if you want to be a good competitor, just go play a bunch. Go play a bunch of tournaments. And there's some truth to that, but in this sense of periodization, we just get more detailed and more organized with it. And to your point about looking, I guess looking back, one of the key things that we do with periodization is backward planning. And so one of the first things you do when you sit down and write your plan out is, when are the big events, right? If I'm a tennis player, I'm a competitive junior tournament player. When are the biggest tournaments of the year that I'm going to play? Okay. If I'm a baseball or softball player, when are the biggest events of the year that we're going to play? And then we backward plan from there. Okay. When I work with players, I sit down with them at the first two questions. If they're on a periodization plan, if they're at this level we're talking about, advanced level player, and the first questions I ask is, when are the big events and when are the vacation times? Right. So when is your family going to go on vacation? And I hope they say yes. I hope they don't say, part of your periodization plan, part of your development should be, well, we don't ever take vacation because Sarah plays tournaments 48 weeks a year and we don't have time for vacation. No, take time for vacation, because part of plan is a rest or recovery period. And so you need those vacation times in order to rest both physically and mentally from the intense sports environment that you've been through at some point. But the two biggest things, the vacation times as well as when are the big events of the year, we circle those on the calendar and then we backward plan from there.
The backward planning, I think, is a phenomenal concept. It was something I was taught years ago, and it was a simple point of view. And it was talking about trying to figure out success in a business or financial success of whatever you're working on at the time. And the question was, can you picture depositing that 1 millionth dollar in your bank account? So picture that, now work backwards. And I thought, that's a really cool idea. So if I'm a football player, if I'm playing American football and I decide, you know what, I'm going pro. Okay, so picture yourself playing in the Super Bowl. Now, how'd you get there? Well, probably by Cadillac. Cadillac got you there. But I mean, work back from a training point of view, from a decision-making plan, and say, okay, can I come all the way back? Now that's at the highest level. I want to be number one in the world in tennis. Okay, great. I want to be the greatest baseball pitcher of all time. Well, that's way into the future. Let's just talking about maybe getting recruited first, right? So we go, but we still have to come back. Well, you got to get recruited first. Okay, what happens before that? Well, what before that? Now, how long do those things take? And you say, well, that's years. Well, now you've already started your periodization working backwards from the future, right?
Yeah, I mean it's probably, I mean those are nice visions, right? Goals, you can call them dreams or goals. Like, I mean, if you're 12-year-olds, and you should embrace that, right? No matter how good they are, if your 12-year-old says, I want to play professional tennis or I want to play Major League Baseball, you should say, as that person's parent or that person's coach, hey, that's great. That's a wonderful idea. That's a great goal, a dream that you have. And that's more, it's way down the road, but we still need to work on that now, right? But I don't ever want to tell somebody like, oh yeah, no, yeah, you really shouldn't think about that. And we know as adults, we know the percentages, right, and how low of a percentage that would be for any child, right? But it's still great, and I think it's still healthy in a lot of ways for them to have that goal. I want to play Major League Baseball. I would like to be number one in the world in tennis. I want to win Wimbledon one day. Okay. Those are great aspirations as a youth player. Okay. What's not healthy is dad at the fence screaming at the kid because his forehand looks terrible, because we're not going to get to Wimbledon if he doesn't have a flawless topspin forehand at age 12. Right. That's what's unhealthy to this situation.
And I'm thinking, so you're saying, okay, the grand goals are nice, and maybe I zoomed out a little too far, but I was kind of picturing it as obviously a less detailed plan. As you zoom out, the detail goes away. So one of the things we do in the periodization concept, where it's a system. Let's see, what does it say here? It says it's a system where the athlete reaches peak performance. Ooh, I like that. We'll shout out to Dr. Cohn. Reaches peak performance at the competition, whatever that means, through a systematic training plan. So here's now we're back to, we're going to look at maybe 1 year. Let's look at this upcoming year, and every day has something scheduled. And what I'd love to start with is the thing that you mentioned, and maybe it's one of the most important things. Many of those days are going to have nothing on them, or Disney World, or go to the park, family time. Many of those days you need that rest and recovery time where everybody just says, let's work every day until we're great. What's the
I mean,
what's the
we're not,
percentage? Can you say, okay, maybe it's one of the 7 days, or you got a
it
general
depends on
idea?
the player, right? And this is where the academic world and the practical world sort of butt heads sometimes, right?
Sure.
If I was sitting in the academic world, I can sit there and I can write you the best periodization plan. We often call it annual periodization because, like you said, it is oftentimes and academically should be a year we're looking at, right? We take the biggest event of the year for the athlete. That's the end of our year, and we backward plan from there. So it's not always a calendar year like January through December. oftentimes, especially with athletes that I work with, their big sport is in the spring or the summer. So they play tennis or they play baseball. So their big season is spring and then often summer. And so that's we kind of look at like July as like the end of the year. And it sort of coincides with the school year actually, because July is kind of the end of your year. Then your rest period is going to be that end of July to early August time when you're should be taking vacation and all that stuff, and then not really playing any sports, definitely not competing. And then when school starts, that's kind of when the new year plan starts. But to answer your question, in an ideal world, it is an annual plan, but sometimes we don't have that at our disposal, right? I get a lot of parents and kids come to me and say, "Hey, Johnny's trying out for he's going to do baseball tryouts. They're in January," and I'm like, "Okay, it's the day before Thanksgiving. Not a lot of time to create an annual periodization plan to get ready for baseball tryouts that are in 6 weeks." So that's the reality that we coaches live in. And how do we come up with something sort of like an annual periodization plan, but maybe scaled to the player's need at the given time?
And in that case, it's not always annual. We look at some of the players that we have at the beginner level, and we had a couple of high school freshmen come in and say, "We want to play high school tennis." Okay, tryouts are in January, same thing. It's October. All right, well, we're going to do 2 days a week. We're going to do as much as we can, but they're really just looking to make their junior varsity high school team because they want to enjoy it. Okay, well, there's some minimums we need to meet. Can you serve? Can you return? And as a coach, you say, okay, well, now I'm going to try to get this all accomplished in this small time frame, 6 to 8 weeks, whatever you've got to get somebody ready. And you say, okay, these are the targets. These are the things we need to accomplish, which is a simpler version of that. I spoke with my wife the other day about this concept, and I said, "Do you remember we were reading that big fancy book about Roger Federer, the beautiful game of whatever it was? It was just too much to read." But one of the things we learned about Roger is for 18 months at a time, he had that rolling calendar. It was just 18 months ahead at all times. He knew what he was going to eat every day, where he was going to be, where he was going to sleep, what his schedule was. It was a periodization of 18 months. No matter what, this never changes. And it's one of the reasons why those guys are hard to get an interview with or whatever it is. Like, well, I got to get
Right.
to the next thing.
It's not in the plan. Interviews
Right,
not in the
because
plan.
I've got 18 months ahead of me
Yeah.
that's expecting me to be in the car right now. Now, that's the high end level, that 18-month scenario. But what that points out is those guys do it too. And I'm guessing this happens at all levels in many sports. Is this more common in certain sports than others in your experience, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, well, sometimes I see it. Baseball, in softball to some degree, they kind of have built-in periodization plans. Like it kind of works itself out, if you will. Because I can tell, like for baseball, you're gonna be hard pressed to find a tournament from July 4th to Labor Day. Right? There's no baseball tournament. So if you're on a travel ball team, there's nothing to play.
You
So it's
almost
sort of
can't get it wrong because of
yeah, so it
the
sort of
inherent
works
schedule.
itself out. Whereas and there's no tournaments. I mean, there's like showcases and stuff like that, but there's no real competition from probably November through about January, maybe February. If your kids, and we're talking youth athletes, we're not talking your high school kid that's going to go down to Florida and do a showcase because he or she's trying to get a Division I scholarship and they have to do their showcase in January. You're not going to find many tournaments, if any, from November through about February. So the travel ball schedule, it sort of works itself out to have periodization in there. Tennis, on the other hand, I've always, for years, you can play all the time if you want. And so I think with tennis, where we do a bad job with our tournament players is it's just tournament after tournament after tournament after tournament. Every lesson's the same. It's highly technically focused. It's not focused on our, building our bodies up as athletes. I'm really a big proponent of being an athlete first. I think a lot of the deficiencies in technique come from a lack of athleticism. And so, you've also got the tactics and strategic play in there. And that all goes into your periodization plan of what to work on when to be ready, as you mentioned, to peak perform when you want to peak perform, which is those big events of the year. But tennis sometimes it's just constant. You know, every week is the same as the next, and you need to plan that out to where you're working on certain things at certain times so that you're ready to go when you need to be ready to go.
And in that case, when does this start? So if we take it from, okay, what is it? Periodization is a system where the athlete reaches peak performance, and competition is systematic training plan. Have a plan is what you said in the beginning, right? So periodization is having a plan. Now, it isn't just I need to fix my forehand in the next couple of months. It's all of the things that need to happen, including strength training and everything at whatever level you're playing, usually a higher level at this point. I don't think beginners that are playing once a week have a lot of periodization plans.
Yeah, if you're learning tennis or you're playing your first coach pitch season of baseball, you don't need a periodization plan. Okay.
Right. It's
And you don't need
fun, it's
anything.
social.
Right. It's fun, it's social. You're introducing yourself to the sport. But once you're competing on a regular basis, you need to have a plan. And, use a periodization plan. I mean, it doesn't have to be that detailed. It just has to be scaled out in the full year. So you're not working on the same thing over and over. And so, well, an often question I ask, what it boils down to, question I'll ask parents is the player, the child, if they're serious about this sport, are they training for this sport or are they just taking lessons? Because oftentimes what will happen is, all right, little Johnny's playing baseball, and oh man, he needs to he wants to be good. He needs to work on his hitting. So let's get him some hitting lessons. And same with tennis, right? If you're like, I'm gonna go take a tennis lesson because I want my son or my daughter, they want to really good at tennis. We're gonna take a lesson. More often than not, what's the coach or the pro gonna do? Pro's gonna watch them hit. Let's hit them. Let's see him hit a few balls. Okay, then let's come up with some technical flaw that they have, and we're gonna focus on that the whole time. And you just do that over and over. And if you're not working outside of that lesson, then you're not really training and developing for your sport. You're just taking a bunch of lessons. It's kind of like like my daughter plays piano, and hopefully she becomes a piano player, but she's working right now and she takes a lesson every week. Every Monday she has a lesson, and then her and this is common for piano. They give them homework assignments. I have so much stuff that they work out. I mean, she probably spends when she wants to. Sometimes it's a push, but she might spend 4 to 5 hours a week, maybe
You got to do your
outside
scales,
that
you got to do your
lesson.
chromatics. Yeah, you got to do
Yeah.
all those things.
And so it's the same should be for an athlete, right? If you're not playing outside of those lessons, you're not training, you're just taking lessons.
And in that case, that takes us to the end of this, which really is who needs this? Because in this case, we know what it is. We know it's a bit of a high level concept. We're not all Roger Federer. So we're not looking at 18 months, what I'm going to eat 6 months from now. I'm going to have the fish at this restaurant because I'm going to be in the third round of this tournament. So it isn't that detailed. But when your kid says, I want to take this seriously, is that about where this is? It says, you know what does it look like if I take tennis seriously? When that question starts getting asked, is that maybe a good starting point?
I think so. And then if they're competing regularly, right? It's not like if I played a season of rec baseball and I want to be really good. That's a different conversation. Yeah, that would be, let's go get you some lessons and see if you can, improve your hitting, improve your pitching, and whatever that is that you want to improve. This is more for that high level player. I want to, and really for the older players. I mean, we're talking kids probably 10 years plus. I'm playing a lot of tournaments. Um, if or baseball, soccer, whatever, I'm competing a lot, and the competition's relatively serious. That's a time, and I want, and like we said, Merlin, maybe not the pie in the sky. I want to be the number one player in the world, but definitely I want to see it, how good I can get. I want to play college baseball. I want to play college tennis. I want to try to play professionally. That's when you sort of start looking at, okay, let's get a yearly plan out so we can help this player continue to develop in a positive way.
So if I can take the next year and take it as seriously as possible, that plan is this. So, Ben,
But remember, that seriousness also includes taking breaks, going to
Downtime.
Disney World, going to a
Yep.
baseball game, going to the beach, hanging
Other
out with
sports.
friends, making birthday parties, those
Yep.
sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that case, Ben, what is periodization? We've answered. Does everybody need it? The answer is no.
No.
Okay, there we go. Then we'll see you next week. Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it. This has been Youth Sports Talk with Coach Ben Hestley. Thanks so much. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, everybody. Hope that helped.